This is Masechah Sanhedrin, Daf Ayin Daled Amud Aleph, and we're looking at the bottom part of the daf in the sugya about Yeharag Vel Yavor, about martyrdom. The Gemara begins, Amar Rabbi Yochanan Mishum Rav Shimon ben Yotzadok, that Rabbi Yochanan made the following statement in the name of Rav Shimon, the son of Yotzadok. Nimnu v'gamru, they voted and decided, Ba'aliyas Beit Nitzah Belud, in the attic of the house of Nitzah in the city of Lud, the following halacha. Kol avero shebaTorah, when it comes to all the sins in the Torah, im omrim la'adam, if some people say to a person, avor v'al tehareg, that you should sin, and you will avoid being killed, but if you keep the mitzvah and don't sin, I will kill you, yavor v'al yehareg, in any such circumstance, a person should sin and avoid being killed. Chutz me avodas kochavim, with the exception of avodah zara, v'gilei arayos, and the forbidden sexual relationships, incest, adultery, ushfichas damim, and murder. These three sins are so bad that a person is not allowed to violate the sin and must give his life to keep them. The Gemara asks, "Ve'avodas kochavim lo," and is it true that avodah zara you don't save your life, that you have to give your life to keep the mitzvah? V'atani, we have a brayso which contradicts this, and this is the brayso. Amar Rabbi Yishmael, that Rabbi Yishmael says, "Minayin." What's the source? She'em omru lo la'adam, that if they told a person, "Avod avodas kochavim ve'al tehareg," do idolatry, bow to an idol, and thereby you will avoid being killed. But if you don't bow, I will kill you. Minayin sheyavod ve'al tehareg. How do you know that you're supposed to serve the idol and avoid being killed? Talmud Lomar, the source in the Torah is v'chai bahem, that the pasuk ushmartem es chukosai v'esmishvatai asher yaseh osam ha'adam v'chai bahem ani Hashem. These are the mitzvahs that you do to live by the mitzvahs. So you see, you have to live by the mitzvahs and not die by the mitzvahs. So v'chai bahem v'lo sheyamos bahem, implying you shouldn't die by the mitzvahs. So from here we learn that it's better to sin and to bow to the idol than it is to lose your life. The Brisa concludes, Yachal afilu b'farhasi, you would think that this is speaking even if it's in public. Talmud Lomar v'lo s'chalu Hashem kadshi v'nikdashti. So we have another pasuk in later on in Vayikra, lo t'chalu Hashem kadshi v'nikdashti b'toch b'nai Yisrael ani Hashem kadishchem, that you shouldn't do a chilul Hashem, you should make a kiddush Hashem. So if you're asked to do idolatry in public, so the need to make a kiddush Hashem and avoid chilul Hashem is so great that you should give your life rather than do the avodah zara. However, if it's not in public and it's not a matter of chilul Hashem, just the violation per se of idolatry, it's better to do the sin of idolatry than to lose your life. So this is a direct contradiction to the decision that was reached in the house in Lud, where they decided that avodah zara is such a bad sin that you have to give your life to avoid doing avodah zara. So the Gemara responds, Inhu da'amar Rabbi Elazar. You're right, there is a machlokas Tanoim, and the rabbis in the house of Nitzah in the city of Lud were not following this brayso of Rabbi Shmuel, but rather they were following the brayso of Rabbi Eliezer. The Tanya of Eliezer, because Rabbi Eliezer says, V'yahavta es Hashem Elokecha b'chol levavecha b'chol nafshecha b'chol miotecha, the familiar pasuk, to love God with your heart and your soul and your possessions. And Rabbi Eliezer analyzes the pasuk in the following way: if it says to love God with your whole body, why does it have to say also with all of meodecha, with all of your possessions? And if it says to love God with your possessions, why is it necessary to say with your whole life? So the reason is as follows: if there's a person whose body, whose life is more precious to himself than his possessions, so for him it says with your life, meaning even your life. meaning to say not only your possessions but even your life. And if there's a person whose money is more precious to him than his life, so for him it says b'chol me'odecha, meaning even not only his life but even his money has to be dedicated to his love for God. So the point being that according to Rabbi Eliezer, a person has to give his life for his love of God, which is, how do you show your love of God? You don't do avodah zarah. So the Gemara concludes that the Tana Rabbi Eliezer is the view who thinks that avodah zarah is a harg vel yavor, and you have to give your life for it, as opposed to Rabbi Shmuel, who thinks that you should rather do avodah zarah than die, and the only exception is if it's in public, because then there's a matter of chil Hashem, of like a public demonstration of your belief, where it will be a chil Hashem, and therefore you have to give your life. A couple of things that are interesting about this Gemara. One is that the Brisa presents that there's two kinds of people. Some value their life more than their money, and some value their money more than their life. And the Torah is addressing both of these perspectives when it uses both words, b'chol nafshecha, b'chol me'odecha. It's interesting because earlier on this daf, the Gemara clearly took a stand on this question about what's more precious, your life or your money. And it's sort of obvious that your life is more precious than your money, but the Gemara here above on our same daf says that a near daf shashiber sakalim shall rodev potter, that if a person is being pursued and while being pursued he breaks something belonging to the pursuer who's trying to kill him, he doesn't have to pay back any damages, and assuming he survives and gets away, he doesn't pay any damages back to the rodev. And the Gemara says the reason is shelo yehei mimono chaviv alav migufo, that no one should ever think that a person's money is more valuable than his life. In other words, if the nirdaf, the victim here, is allowed to kill the rodev to protect himself, kal v'chomer, he can break the rodev's possessions. And as Tosos presents it, it's a kal v'chomer. If the halacha is that a nirdaf could take the life of his rodev to save his life, kol shekain denitan b'mimono, certainly he can take the money of the rodev. So obviously, the viewpoint that your money is more valuable than your life is just mistaken. But nevertheless, it's interesting that according to Rabbi Eliezer, the Torah needs to address the correct perspective and the incorrect perspective, and saying that no matter what you think is more important, it all has to be dedicated to service of God and the love of God. It's interesting also that a person could potentially have to give his life to avoid doing avodah zarah, when earlier in the Masechta, the Gemara tells us that ha'oved avodas kochav me'ahava me'yira Abaye amar chayav Rava amar pater, that if a person serves avodah zarah because of love or fear, and Rashi says me'avas adam u'me'iras adam, that a person does avodah zarah not because he truly believes in the idol, but because of a love for a person or a fear for a person. For example, a person, let's say he's married to an ovid avodah zarah, to a pagan, so he comes to church in order to express his love for his spouse, chas v'shalom. So this person hasn't done the true sin of avodah zarah according to Rava. Or yiras adam, or he's scared, he's fearful of his in-laws are going to kill him, so he does avodah zarah. So he hasn't truly done avodah zarah according to Rava. Abaye says chayiv. Abaye says he has done the sin because he still did the action. Rava amar pater, right? Abaye amar chayiv da palcha. Abaye says the sin is defined by the action. Rava amar pater, ikiblei alei be'aloha in ilolo. If you believe in it, it's avodah zarah. If you don't believe in it, it's not really avodah zarah. So Tosos asks the question. So if Rava says it's pater, so why is it that we see that avodas kochavim is yeharag v'yavor, that you have to die to avoid the sin. If you didn't even do the sin, if someone tells you, I'll kill you if you don't bow down, clearly you're doing it miyira and not because you suddenly believe in the power of the avodah zarah. So Tosfos responds, Yeshloma nehida chayev limsor atzmo l'chadchila, that despite the fact that there's a mitzvah to give your life for it, mikol makom hechad lo masar atzmo lo machayev misa. Nevertheless, you're not chayev misa for the sin because of the fact that you don't really believe in it, which is a fascinating point. Tosfos thinks that that even though you're not doing the true sin of avodas kochavim, when you're forced into doing it, there's still an obligation of martyrdom to die for the cause and not to do the action of avodas kochavim.